My dear friends, we have been asked to pray especially for life on this day. We know that the devil wants this sacrifice to himself, the innocent babes, not of Bethlehem, but of Ireland. And the risk is that if we're not careful, it will come in through the side or back door. You know what I mean. There is a duty to speak out. I picked up this from the Office of Readings vigils this night, and it is a salutary reminder that perhaps we are responsible for certain things, because if they're not said, then we bear the consequences before Almighty God. Years ago I had translated this book into English. It's the famous rule of Gregory the Great, the pastoral rule, which influenced generations of priests until, I suppose, the late Middle Ages. Listen. A religious leader should be careful in deciding when to remain silent and be sure to say something useful when deciding to speak. In this way, he will avoid saying things that would be better not said, or leaving unsaid things that ought to be said. For just as thoughtless remarks can lead people into error, so also ill-advised silence can leave people in their error, when they could have been shown where they were wrong. Negligent religious leaders are often afraid to speak freely and say what needs to be said, for fear of losing favour with people. As Truth himself says, they are certainly not guarding their flock with the care expected of a shepherd, but are acting like hirelings, because hiding behind a wall of silence is like taking flight at the approach of the wolf. And listen to this. These are the people whom the Lord is reproaching through the prophet when he says, they are all dumb dogs, they cannot bark. Our Lady, too, has been making a noise in her own gentle way. She does not bark, but she has hints to drop if we're willing to pick them up. You've all heard of the miraculous image of Guadalupe. Well, that is a string of miracles. We have discovered, of course, that in the iris, you can actually, if you go into digital amplification of this iris, you will find what she's looking at when she appears. And you have there before her those who are watching. And it's historically true. That's all recent science finding things which they couldn't possibly have invented. Because if I look at you, you can see yourself in my iris. Now, in recent times, this same image, miraculously preserved, has been doing other things. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. Our Lady of Guadalupe attempts to pass a significant message on through the miraculous image. On the 24th of April 2007, the Council of Mexico City was about to legalize abortion on demand. That day, the faithful who gathered in the basilica noticed that the image began to blur. She was not amused, therefore. She was showing discreetly that she was not pleased. Then, the bright light of a child shape appeared in Our Lady's womb. Photographic analysis excluded the possibility of any manipulation of light from the outside. Now, I think this is actually the picture of that miracle. All you can see is a bit of light, but it's actually, it would seem, a heavenly light just over the womb of the Blessed Virgin. It doesn't stop there. The image of Our Lady of Guadalupe has been used, as we know, and still is, as the emblem of prayer against abortion. And at this time, a very unusual phenomenon took place. They applied, would you believe it, a stethoscope to the image around the womb area. And what did they find? The stethoscope recorded the beating of 2 hearts, implying therefore that there was a hint that Our Lady was showing with this modern means that really a pregnant woman is not alone. At the other end of the scale is life jettisoned. Love is the meaning of life, and if one spends it extinguishing life, one is a being of hatred. The war is the epitome of that. But so too is abortion, declared warfare on those who can't do a thing to defend themselves. But in the war, life became very cheap. Napoleon once was heard to say this after he had noticed the large number of people lost. I think it was on the occasion of the putrid bodies on the battlefield, and a command should have been given to send out a few men to bury them. But they would be lost and shot down. What are a few men? I would have the equivalent in one night in a brothel in Paris. Conception, that is, was cheap. But life is not cheap. But that mentality of easily disposing of life was still there in the Second World War and the First. And I picked up this morning and looked again at something which had quite upset me when I heard it some years ago. It was on the BBC, the Welsh BBC, the radio. It was at breakfast time one morning, and I was there with Dad, and this came on the air. It was some anniversary of the First World War, and there were a few veterans still around. They were going out to where it had happened, the Somme and so on. Many Welsh graves are there. But it was one of the survivors who was coming out with this, describing what was going on. The front line was in shreds, he said in Welsh, bits of men. But there was another testimony. One sergeant was briefing the soldiers before they fired, and he came out with this: "I want no mercy. Remember, he's your enemy." And this young soldier, a Welshman of 22, in his innocence and perhaps lack of prudence, muttered, "But how can he be my enemy? I never even saw his face." "What did you say? Come this way." And they put him against the wheel of a cannon, and under a firing squad, he was dispatched. My friends, that was cheap life. And yet he died a glorious death. I would like to leave you with that, my friends. Every time that we consent to some dagger coming from our lips, the tongue being used as a weapon to hurt, we are in some way playing that game of extinction and hatred. We are messing up our lives and that of those around us, and it's more frequent than we think. People going through life in negative mode, sinning against charity and yet coming to Holy Communion and receiving the Lord on that same tongue which they have used as a dagger. And people too who extinguish other people's reputation behind their back, extinguishing their soul, so to speak. Words, my friends, are weapons, but they are also modes of healing. Think of these things, my friend. I will just leave you with this. I'll quote maybe a few lines of this because it hurt me when I heard this it may help you also to see what we're about as we travel through this game of life. A word, when never said, is never known. And when a thought moves not the air, the mind hears not its neighbour's thinking. Rarely shown were views of thought to eyes of humankind. Though the souls of some saw more than sight, that's a reflection on the mystics. Some people know what you're thinking, the angels do, so don't think nasty thoughts. But this small word here spoken, little man, with rapid thought and with more rapid flight, fled from thy breast and left thee pale and wan. It did not know that love had not a place in this new world that others had devised. How can he be my enemy whose face I never saw? Said youth, when well advised by years to stab and hurt and kill, and not to die till death had had its fill.